Welcome, everybody. I forgot to put myself on stage. You too can be a podcaster. Oh my gosh, it's been one of those days. Nicole is with us moderating the comments, and we were talking before we went live about our day. So, welcome everyone to Eternal Life Plan. Sorry for that snafu, but it is live, so you'll never know what to expect with me. I hope you liked that thumbnail in the beginning of Pope Benedict reading a letter, shocked. I had to make just something a little lighthearted about this subject because it happens to be a very serious subject. Today, we're diving into one of the most heated controversies in the Catholic world, the resignation of Pope Benedict XVI and the theories known as Benny papism that claimed Benedict never truly stepped down as Pope. The conspiracy theories were spinning like crazy and still are. For years, these theories fueled division and mistrust within the church. Our guest, Stephen O'Reilly, has written about this extensively. And now, thanks to the recent publication of Monsignor Nicola Buck's new book, we have something concrete. A 2014 letter written by Benedict himself where he directly rejects those theories. Joining me today is Stephen O'Reilly, who has been one of the leading voices writing on Benedict's resignation and the collapse of Benny papism. And I want you all to give Stephen a warm welcome.
Good evening, Christine. How you doing?
Thank you, Stephen. I am having trouble with the controls tonight.
Well, I think I told you there's a thunderstorm in the background, so I might kind of blink out or something. That's what's going on.
If you go away, it's because of the thunderstorm.
Yep.
Okay. So, Stephen, let me start out by asking you this. What motivated you personally to take on this subject and write so extensively about Benedict's resignation and the rise of Benny papism?
Well, I guess this is back in the time of, I think, my first articles on Benny papism. At the time, I called it BIP, or Benedict is Pope. And I changed it to Benny papism when he got close to death. And I was writing my book. I didn't think the Benedict is Pope would be in effect too much longer after his death, of course. So I needed a new word for that. But going back to 2017, when I first started writing on it, I mean, this is in the wake of Amoris Laetitia. I had my concerns about the document then and still do. And I do think eventually, whether it's Leo or not, or a subsequent Pope, I think it will be addressed and fixed. But at the time, a lot of people were kind of casting about because of that and some of the confusion people perceived, I think fairly perceived kind of confusion coming out of Rome. People were kind of casting about for theories. Why is this? This Pope is so much different from prior popes. And so, I mean, I was looking, what's going on here? So I had a Jesuit had shared a couple theories that one of his friends had and all that. So I started looking to that. And then I started seeing the stuff about Benedict's resignation not being valid. Oh, and also in that time too, I'd started looking at the conclave. There's so much stuff out there about the St. Gallen Mafia. Their kind of influence were impacting that. So I did a lot of research. McCarrick had talked about the influential Italian gentleman that came out later in the wake of Vigano's testimony in 2018 or 19, whatever that was. Going back to 2017. So I started hearing that, and I thought I was interested in it. Oh, that sounds interesting. That'd be great if someone can prove that he's not, and that solves, our quote unquote Francis problem. But I'm not one who just let's just give me anything and I'll hold on to that. If it's a false theory, I don't care. Just give me a reason to disagree with Francis or whatever, or to say he's not a pope. It had to be real and true and all that. So when I first got it, I was actually disposed to hearing it and actually hoping there was something here. But I think it was an article, I think by Ann Barnhart or one of her associates, Mark Doherty, looked at this. I think they're talking about I think it was the Wednesday, the last audience of Benedict. And he talked about the OEs and forever. And that's another subject. And I actually read the document. I said, it doesn't say what they're saying. It says. And so for the beginning, I said, this doesn't smell right. And the more, so I wrote about that. Then, of course, they started looking for more evidence and all that. But the more evidence they found, I thought the worse their theory got. So I ended up just writing articles kind of refuting what they found. I'd examine it and then refute it. But you said, why did I devote so much time to it? Partly it's my interest in, the truth gets out, and no one really, there were other people writing about it. I have to give hats off to Ryan Grant, wrote a nice article for 1 Peter 5, where he talked about the munus and the ministerium being synonyms. And that's an important part of what goes into this Benedict letter as well. And then while I was writing the book in 2021 timeframe, 22, I met online Father John Rickert, FSSP, who had written some articles in response for W.M. Briggs' website. And then he ended up having a exchange with Dr. Mazza at the time. And so I wrote Father, and we kind of struck up a friendship. And then he started throwing me some ideas for the book. So some of the stuff that goes into my book, hats off to Ryan, hats off to the Father Rickert. But part of the focus too is that my blog is so small, and it started off with just me, but then a friend of mine, Ed Barr, also writes for the blog. But we have day jobs, and we can't devote ourselves to daily, what's the latest thing, and write the daily news and what's going on. So you have to kind of pick and choose your topics on things that you have more time to think about. And so that's kind of a practical reason to why some of the subjects we focus on we can take our time with and research a little more thoroughly than just kind of putting out the article of the day.
Yeah, I get having a day job and then trying to do something else along the way, because I struggle with that myself. Let's take everybody to your website, okay, Stephen?
Sure.
And I'll share my screen, and y'all, this is his website, and we will scroll his website at the bottom of the broadcast so you can see where to go to support Stephen. But this is the article that he wrote that we're going to be talking about tonight, The Stake Through the Heart of Benny Papism. But go to ROMALOQUTAEST.com. Nicole will scroll it at the bottom. And this is Stephen's website. Very well done. You can see all the articles on the right-hand side. And Stephen is very thorough. Here is his book. If you're interested in getting his book, which I would recommend that put this on your reading list. And then now available, The Resignation of Pope Benedict XVI. Is this valid? As he said, valid ? Another great one that you can get as well. So there you have it. I'll take you to his homepage. And this is his homepage. So you'll be able to get all of your content to support Stephen at his website. So
and too, when you say support too, I don't take that's just to read. Just read it. It's all free. I don't look for any donations. We do not. As I have a video series too out there on Benny Papism, and I always remind folks I do not accept any kind of donations or anything like that. So this is really just read it. It's for the benefit of the reader. I'm not. Except I guess for my book, I guess you have to buy the book, but that's at a low price, and that's for the benefit of the reader and for those who kind of get sucked into Benny Papism.
Yes, thank you. Support, I mean that they follow you, yep. They follow your work.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. So really check out his website. All right, so this 2014 letter, Stephen, is at the center of your recent article. Why do you think it took so long to surface publicly, and why is its timing so significant?
Well, I think it's a good question why it did take a while for it to come out. And this happened back, as you said, 2014. So we're 11 years out from that. Actually, the letter was written, I think, a year ago today, Rome time, actually. So it's a year, well, not a year ago. Sorry, 11 years ago.
Yeah.
Today, Rome time. So August 20.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. This really wasn't a surprise to you, was it?
Oh, no, not at all. Because what the arguments, well, we can get into in a second, but the crux of the whole of Benny Papism for the two main theories revolves around this alleged difference between the word ministerium and munus, which are in the Declaratio, where Benedict talks about resigning the ministry or ministero, or which is based on the word ministerium in Latin. He said, I resign the ministry of the Bishop of Rome, effective such and such a date, and after which the see of, in such a way that the see of Rome will be vacant. And he goes on from there. But the word that the Benny Papists say that he used the wrong word. He used the word ministerium when he should have used munus, and they base that on canon 332, where it says the Bishop of Rome, when he resigns the munus, he has to do so freely, and gives the various conditions from there. So they say, well, he didn't use the right word, he used ministerium. But there's various problems with their arguments. That one, the canon doesn't state that the word munus has to be used. Another problem is that ministerium is a synonym of munus. It's in some very respected Latin dictionaries as a synonym. In other dictionaries, they have overlapping definitions like task, office, service, duty. So they have overlapping meanings. So there's no reason why he couldn't have used that. And also, in fact, if you look at the Declaratio, which is, again, the official instrument of Benedict's resignation, I guess the official version of it, which is in the Acta Apostolica Sedis, which is the AAS, is the official kind of journal of the Holy See. The title of the Declaratio there uses the word munus in it. I don't have the exact title handy here, but I have articles on that on my blog and in my book as well. But it's on the abdication of the munus of the Bishop of Rome. That's basically what it says in the title. So what is in the title of the document refers you to what the meaning is in the text. In the text, again, he uses that word ministerium or ministry in saying, I renounce the ministry of the Bishop of Rome. So, but the point is that shows that the meanings are similar, they're synonymous. There's other things we can look at, lumen gentium. Again, I got this from Father Rickard when I was writing my book. He found this in Lumen Gentium from Vatican II, I think it was paragraphs 18 through 20, where it talks about the hierarchical structure of the church. It talks about how the apostles, when they were coming towards the end of their lives and they were to pass on their ministries, it says that among the ministries, and it uses the word ministeria, again, that's ministerium, among the ministries, chief amongst them is the munus of the bishop. So if among the ministries is a munus, that means a munus is a ministerium. And the significance of that is, if you're talking about the Pope, well, if a ministry is a munus, well, if you resign the ministry, you necessarily resign the munus, right? You can't have one without the other. So they both are logically entailed by the other. You resign one, you renounce the other as well. And that's kind of what runs through what Bucks wrote about as well. Bucks wrote a preface for a book. Now, this is many years after he had knowledge of this letter in his head, but he wrote a book. He wrote a preface for a book, which was kind of refuting an Italian book that refuted the Ratzinger Code back in 2023, I believe it was. And in there, he says that if you renounce the ministry, you renounce the papacy. So they're connected. And that kind of brings us maybe to address the letter. What the background for that is, I think Books had a meeting with Ratzinger in late July of 2014. And out of that, I think he handed him a letter, or he sent a letter with some additional questions about some of the controversies about him resigning the way he did, his use of also the title of Pope Emeritus. So he wrote this letter, or gave this letter to Ratzinger, or to Pope, or Benedict XVI, after his resignation, and he received a response back on August 21st of 2014. And in that letter, I mean, it's not a very long letter. Just here's the English translation of it. And it's also, I give the pertinent text is also in my article, "The Stake Through the Heart of Many Papism." He's responding to Books, where Books had talked about, people thinking that you're splitting up the munus and the ministerium, or resigning one and not the other, about theologians saying this or historians saying this. And the second paragraph of Benedict's response, he says, "In my opinion," then this is in scare quotes, "in my opinion, the authoritative historians and the other theologians," terms which Books had used, "are neither historians nor theologians, are neither true historians nor true theologians. The speculations they propose are, in my opinion, absurd." So he's calling all these theories absurd. To say that in my resignation, I would have left, and this is in quotes, "only the exercise of the ministry and not also the munus," end quote, is contrary to the clear dogmatic canonical doctrine. So here he's saying he not only left the ministry, but he left the munus, left the office. So he left it all. And the reason why and how that's important to the whole debate on Benedict papism is that if you take some of the theories that are out there, like a theory that's kind of popularized by Anne Barnhart and some of her friends, is that they say that Benedict he committed a substantial error. He attempted to partially resign the papacy. He was going to give up the ministry, which is like the exercise of the papacy, but he's going to hold on to the munus. He was separating the two. And that goes to the question of the use of the words munus and ministerium in the Declaratio. So he was going to give up the ministry, but hold on to the munus. So Anne Barnhart would say he was trying to partially resign the papacy, which of course you can't do, which she says, and therefore his resignation was invalid because you can't do. He tried to do something you couldn't do. Then on the other hand, you have someone like Andrea Cianci, who believes that this is all kind of a plan of Benedict XVI, that he wanted. So Barnhart says this is like a mistake. He did something in error, whereas Cianci would say that Benedict intentionally sabotaged basically his own resignation, that he kind of gave up the ministry, but because he wanted to keep the munus, because he was trying to keep the papacy out of the hands of the modernists who were trying to take over the church. So you have one group saying it was kind of an accident, or he committed an error trying to do this thing, and then you have the other group, Cianci, saying no, he intended to kind of mess up his resignation so he could retain the papacy. But with what this means, though, here is with Benedict's statement that these things are absurd. That to say that in my resignation I would have left only the exercise of the ministry and not also the munus is contrary to the clear dogmatic canonical doctrine of the Church. So that means he was not separating the two words. He understood they went together. So that kind of blows up Barnhart's theory, because she says, well, he intended to hold on to the munus. He thought he could do that. Well, he's saying, no, I didn't do that. I gave it all up. So that undermines.
Let me ask you this, Stephen. Sorry to interrupt you. Why is Barnhart being so stubborn about her theory when clearly Pope Benedict says what his intention was?
Well, that's kind of curiosity of the whole thing. I have not seen. I've been waiting to see what she might say on it. Dr. Maz has not. He kind of touched upon it back in November. See, we started getting rumors that this letter existed last year. I think people in Rome have known about this for years, apparently. But Vigano had published a letter back in November of 2024, so just this past November. And he basically characterized what was said pretty accurately. So he clearly had, I think, a copy of the text in front of him, even though he didn't publish it. But he basically said all that Benedict did not separate the meanings. He viewed the words as basically synonyms. And he said that. And then Dr. Mazza went on a Tim Gordon podcast shortly thereafter, and he admitted that if that's true, that basically destroys his theory, destroys Chauncey's theory. And now, to his credit, he said that. But then again, he kind of said, "But I could still, but still, there's a way of doing this where maybe that it still says Benny Papism." You know, he didn't use those exact words, obviously, but so he's still. So I haven't seen. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Trying to twist himself in a pretzel to be right.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And then so I don't know what he currently would say about it. And I think I saw there's a journalist out there who does podcasts now. And I think I saw a retweet of one of his where he said, "Oh, coming on this week will be Ed Mazza." And I think the topic was the Book's letter, or the Benedict's new letter. So I'll be interested to see what he has to say. I doubt very much that he has recanted his theories on this. I haven't seen what Ann Barnhart has said on this, and I think that's curious too. I think they don't know what to say. Chauncey, in his fashion, has he's kind of reading it with his code. He kind of has applied his Ratzinger code to this to say, well, this still really proves his point that he really did mess up his resignation intentionally in order to keep the moon. So he's not giving any ground. But the difference with Chauncey and I think the other ones are Chauncey at least seems to be accepting Leo as Pope. It's kind of funny. When he first was elected, he said he's 85% sure that he's Pope. And then I saw a video of his the other day where he said he's 90%. He's 90% certain that Leo is Pope. Not 100%, but 90%. So they're still hedging their bets a little. But so in that case, you might see that there's some Benny Papists who might come to terms with Leo and then hold the question mark over Francis's papacy for as long until it doesn't matter anymore, I guess.
Okay, so in your view, then, if I can paraphrase you, the Benny Papism, I should say, Benny Papism is more about theological misunderstanding, or is it mistrust of church leadership, or just plain ideology rigidity?
No, like I said, I think it started off with, I think there were some valid questions, some concerns that people had. I mean, I had them. I believe I was a rational guy, that they're valid concerns, some odd things that happen. And then people look for solutions. So in that sense, I think they were certainly initially were, I think, well motivated to try to understand this confusing time in the church. However, I think for the types of when they started getting into their theories, I might have more sympathy for them. Not that it matters if I have sympathy, but I think me personally, I'd have more sympathy for their take if they were softer in what they alleged. If we have some questions, there's some open questions about this or that the church needs to resolve. What does Pope Emeritus mean, and what words should be used for resignation or something like that? But they're pretty doctrinarian in proclaiming, or at least a number of them were pretty doctrinarian in proclaiming Francis an anti-pope, and they wouldn't put up with any resistance. And if anyone who dared, they ridicule or launch ad hominems. I've never made a secret of being, like I said, a former intelligence officer. So some of these people, some of the Benny Papists were friends of mine beforehand, but once after this passed, it's like, that I'm in the employ of the CIA to write what I write, which is ridiculous, and so instead of taking on some of these arguments that I put out there, it's just like, oh, he's a CIA agent or something like that. In fact, Dr. Mazza, in a debate with Matt Gaspers a year or two ago, he said, when Gaspers quoted some information from my book, Dr. Mazza said, why are you using any of arguments from him? His arguments are from the CIA, or words to that effect. So that's kind of the nonsense that's out there, but no, I just kind of grin and bear it. But
so because you had a position with the CIA, then you're not credible.
Well, that's it. So it's a genetic fallacy. Instead of just take on the argument, I'm not with the CIA. Like I said, I don't write for anyone but myself. I'm responsible, or any writers on the blog write for themselves, not for anybody else, or at the behest of anybody else.
That's crazy stuff, Stephen. My gosh.
But back to your question. I say, I think there's some, I think, I guess, good motives or purer motives, but over time, I think their arguments, though, are pretty tendentious and biased, and they exclude evidence that doesn't fit their case. They don't address it. So it's rare that they'll ever respond to an article or any bit of information that I might put out there. One clear example is, we talked about this letter here, but Benedict, on the day he actually resigned, that became effective. It became effective on February 28th of 2013. He gave a little talk, from the balcony. I think Castel Gandolfo in Albano, Italy, and there's a plaza full of cheering pilgrims beneath him, and I think he was speaking off the cuff. I don't think he was reading from prepared materials, but he said, he said this in Italian, but in English to translate, part of it was he was about 2.5 hours away from his resignation becoming effective, and he said, "I am no longer the supreme pontiff of the Catholic Church, or at least, or will not be at come 8 o'clock." Now, Anne Barnhart has never addressed that statement. How that doesn't fit? It doesn't fit their theory. I am no longer the supreme pontiff. That includes the Munists. That's an office. You can't argue that that's he's only talking about the ministerium. He's talking about an office, supreme pontiff. You can't even make that distinction there. So how do they explain that? They don't. Dr. Mazza's never talked about it. They all know it exists. It doesn't show up in any of his books talking about it. The only one Benny Papist on that side of the argument who's ever mentioned it is a guy named Mark Doherty. The only time he mentioned it when he was formally against Anne Barnhart's view and used that as evidence against her in an article. But then he switched within the next month to her side. But it's like, but he never got an answer from Anne as to what that meant. How does she explain it?
It's almost like suggesting
the explanation for it.
It's almost like suggesting, Stephen, that Pope Benedict intentionally sabotaged his papacy.
Well, that's Chauncey. That's Chauncey, yes. But the kind of the Barnhart theory is that he wanted to resign the active ministry. That's what they would call the ministerium. That's what he said in the Declaratio. I resigned the ministerium or ministerio. But he neglected and did not resign the Munists because he wanted to hold on. He still wanted to be Pope in some way.
But see, that in itself, that explanation in itself is saying that Pope Benedict was sabotaging his resignation because he still wanted some amount of control.
In a way, you could say that, but I think they would say that in their theory that Benedict still thought he would be able to kind of be Pope in some way, but Francis could still his successor would still be Pope too. So you would have like a dual papacy or a diarchy, papal diarchy. Now, when you get to Chauncey, now how does Chauncey explain that statement? I am no longer the supreme pontiff of the Catholic Church. Well, his is pretty funny. The other ones don't even try to explain it. His is funny because he looks at it. He looked at the Italian of what, because he is Italian, and Benedict said these words in Italian, and in Italian he said "Non sono più il pontefice sono," which is I will no longer be. If you take a literal translation, I will no longer be the pontiff supreme, which sounds kind of funny to the English ears, which would be you would say it in Italian, "Sommo Pontifice," not Pontifice Sommo. So he reversed it, and then Chauncey said, well, he reversed it. He said there's no such thing as a Pontifice Sommo, a pontiff supreme. So this is like a code that Benedict was using to show that he's actually going to somehow remain the Pope. That I actually
remember that.
he inverted the words to kind of call the attention of those who really understand what's going on that he actually was signaling that he's keeping what he had. But when I was writing my book, I did research and I found multiple instances in Italian used by popes or other peoples of Pope where pontifice sommo, what he said does not exist at all, does exist. It is used, and it means the same thing as supreme pontiff. It's a synonymous. It means the same thing. And I put that in my book. I wrote that in an article directed to him, and then he responded to me in an article, and he kind of laughed. He basically admitted I was right. But instead of saying, okay, you're right, and I will withdraw my theory on that, he just said, well, that just proves my theory, because it just shows he was using a rarer term for this, just to call attention to it. So it's just all gaslighting is what it was.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's just spinning. Okay, so this is a controversial question I'm going to ask you, because in your article you describe Benny-Papism as a kind of gateway drug to sedevacantism. Can you unpack how that progression happens for Catholics?
Well, I saw it online, at least in a couple cases. This one of the reasons why I said it. People who you kind of get in, you know, as you know, on Twitter, right? You get into discussions, and arguments. Some friendlier than others, and all that, more heated than others. But people over the years, you know, in the beginning, they know that I'm against, you know, the Benny-Papist theories and all that. So you get some followers who kind of chime in from the other side from time to time. But a couple of them you'd see over time, you find out that they ended up switching to full-blown sedevacantism. I guess they couldn't reconcile, you know, what they got into Benny-Papism that made them start questioning their faith in other terms, what's been going on in the church. Then they ended up finding themselves or moving into sedevacantism. So when what you're seeing now is, like I said, I'm not quite sure what is going to happen with the Benny-Papists. I mean, like I said, Cianci seems to be moving towards 90% Leo is a true pope. So you might have kind of like that kind of group that will, you know, fully stay in the church, and they'll probably just go down in history thinking, oh, they'll probably treat the Francis case probably like some pope from, you know, Pope Stephen the 7th or 8th. Was he a true pope or wasn't he a true pope? It's kind of like, it becomes just a academic question whether or not he was a true pope or not for them, I think. So I think it wouldn't affect too many matters of faith to say that he wasn't, I guess, for them. So I think they can try to reconcile it in their mind, stay in the church, and then go on peacefully. But I think there's others, and I hesitate to name name. I don't know. I haven't seen Ann Barnhart, what she has said about Leo. I don't follow her close enough to say that about her. But I do know that Dr. Mazza, because I don't mean to keep on coming back to him, but he is more vocal, more visible coming on the podcast. And he was on a Tim Flanders show, I think, right after the election of Leo. And he was kind of threw out some questions about whether or not he was a true pope. And I don't want to characterize him saying that he is a sedevacantist in that regard, because Flanders, I think, characterized Dr. Mazza's view as being a hypothesis, and I think Ed nodded to that. So at least hypothetically. But then he was on a show a couple of weeks ago with this journalist, and the journalist, I think, described him as a sedevacantist, and then I think Dr. Mazza said, "Well, no, I'm a interregnist." I think he said something which is really a distinction without a difference. An interregnist would be someone who believes we're in the between reigns of popes. You know, like after one dies and you're waiting, you know, for 2 weeks for the next one to be elected. I guess we're interregnist there. So, but again, so I don't know if he's still holding. So again, I don't want to characterize and say he is. But that's why I kind of jokingly titled that article, Dr. Mazza, the semi-vacantist. Semi-vacantist. I don't know if he is or isn't. But that there's, you kind of see a movement there, and then you see some of the tone on Twitter and all that. A lot of folks kind of clearly questioning Leo. I can't say how big it is, but I think you'll get some diehards that will kind of go down that track. So I can kind of see some giving up on it, or treating it as a historical academic question as they get more distance from it, and they'll accept Leo, and that was just kind of a phase of their life they went through. They might still say, "Oh, Benedict didn't resign, but it doesn't matter. Francis never declared any matters of faith or morals. That's dogmatic. So, and they might say, so it's an academic question whether or not he really was or was not a pope as they get further away from it. But I think others are going to will stick with he was not a pope, and that has kind of gotten them into this now period where they're questioning Leo. And I think, and some very seriously, or some might even fully reject him right now. But once you go kind of get into that road, right, you've already thought Francis was an anti-pope. Now you think Leo is not a true pope. And then whenever he passes off, shuffles off this mortal coil, you get another pope. You get 2 or 3 popes into it. When you start saying you're just a plain out Sede Vacantis. And so that's why I think they're kind of getting sucked into this. A group of them are, and that's unfortunate. That's why I call
when their guy, Stephen, when their guy becomes pope, then they'll recognize him as their guy as pope.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. So yeah, when you get one you like, but I grew up in the 60s and 70s. I mean, we had liberal popes. You kind of just, Pope Paul VI, he picked a lot of bad bishops. That was a confusing time for the church, but you got to grin and bear it. You worry about those things you can affect, and I can't control what the Pope does. You can pray, we can maybe call out some things in articles and all that, but ultimately when it comes down to it, we really don't control what goes on in Rome. And it's the Lord's church ultimately, and he's not going to let things get too out of hand. I always talk about the case of Pope Honorius. He basically, it goes back to the time of the Monothelite heresy, where he ultimately, I guess the different theologians debate what actually he was guilty of. I'm in the camp that says he was guilty of favoring heresy, not of being a heretic, but of favoring heresy. But he was condemned by Pope Saint Leo II. He was condemned, and then the Ecumenical Council condemned him as a heretic. But it took 40 years between his death and when he was finally basically condemned or disciplined by Leo II. It was like 40 years between that time. So it might take 40 years for things to work out, in this confusing period. And so people just need to be patient, and not expect God to work, in our time frame, and then kind of get kind of antsy and then kind of jump ship, into Sede Vacantism or something else or something worse.
So is Pope Leo, in your opinion, the Pope?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean,
all right. I thought so. All right. Let me ask you, I always talk about in my podcast, Steve, that I'm a shabby Catholic. I'm the ordinary Catholic that's sitting next to you in the pew. So let's talk about the everyday Catholic who may have followed all of these claims, these conspiracy theories about Pope Benedict. How do you think the release of this letter will impact them? And my biggest fear is that they won't, they'll be listening to the other influencers about this. And because what I have found so much, even in comments on my videos, that people are not critically thinking anymore. Whatever somebody says, that's what they go with. They're not sitting there analyzing it and thinking, is this true? Is this really true? And doing their own research.
Well, that's the thing. I would just ask folks who have been enticed or have been attracted to the Benny Papist arguments, or to the idea, that Francis, whatever, I need something to latch on to, and they've kind of latched on to Benny Papism as their solution. I would go back to what I said about Honorius. You can have good popes, you can have bad popes, and it could take 40 years before things get ironed out. But with the evidence is that they really should examine the evidence. Like my articles, my book is based on my articles essentially. I mean, there's additional research in it, but you can get everything you need to get in my articles, and they're free. And to go through that, find the issues that you think are the strongest case, the strongest evidence you think that the Benny Papists have, and find the articles on my site. Send me an email, I will respond to you. But I think that the problem is that I think that like I said, the Chauncy type of folks right now seem to be going towards accepting Leo, but they're still not. They look at the letter from Benedict the 14th, and they're kind of using that as just another code. And then I think I haven't seen Barnhart and all them. I've not talked about it yet. I'm waiting to see what Ed says about it, Dr. Mazza. But I've seen people. I have seen articles or writings where people say it doesn't change anything. So, but the reality is, like, yes, what's the reaction going to be of folks to the letter? On the one side, it is, I think, a stake through the heart, is that for the intellectually honest person, you'll see that you have Benedict saying, I'm not separating the ministerium from the munus. And that really destroys the Ratzinger code theory. It destroys the Barnhart theory. But then you have people that are going to rationalize that away. So then you have like what practically is going on. You could lead a horse to water. You can't make him drink. I mean, the evidence is all there. Before you would have what's funny about it is, like, you have, like, say on Barnhart and on her theory, they'd go find these German theologians from the 1960s and say, oh, these German theologians talked about this. This is evidence that Benedict believed this. Well, you can't use that. Benedict didn't say those things that those Germans said. Or Dr. Mazza will go find some dusty old textbook that Ratzinger wrote, or Benedict, when he was Cardinal Ratzinger, wrote back in the 70s, and say, well, he'll find some passage. Well, he'll misread the passage, first of all, and say, oh, this, if you understand his words this way, that means he possibly was separating or something like that. But then when you get to words that he actually said around the time of the resignation, like, I am no longer the supreme pontiff of the Catholic Church, silence, no word about it. Then you have this statement, this letter written 1 year after he resigned, and here he's saying what he intended to do. I intended to give up the ministerium and the munus. How do you explain that? That you can't quote him from like 40 years ago and then not address things like this. So it'll be interesting to see what they say. But I think they'll try to explain it away. But for the intellectually honest person who kind of understands what's going on, I think they will see it as a stake in the heart of any papism. But yeah, for those, they're always going to be like the diehards, that kind of the bunker mentality. They're not coming out for nothing. And like I said, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And so I think there will be some diehards in there.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think will happen if they just dig in?
Well, they'll just continue on. They'll carry into Pope Leo, or I think it has for some, carried into Pope Leo, then from Pope Leo to whoever, Pope Leo the 15th,
Yeah.
Benedict the 17th. And that's sad to see. I think, like I said, but I think there will be some who will take the kind of pragmatic route, the compromise route, saying, yeah, Francis was not a true pope, but Leo was, and then his successors. But they'll always say Francis wasn't. And
Yeah.
I guess there's no punishment for that. I suppose. I think that's how they'll come to terms with it. They'll just kind of move on. Say, yeah, that's, they'll write a book or write a movie about that, and that'll be the end of it.
Yeah. The one thing that I really like about Pope Leo is he seems very measured. And I'm glad that he just didn't come in and just start changing things. It's like he's taking his time. He's slow walking it all. What's your opinion about Pope Leo?
Oh, Frank, I haven't been watching a lot of it. I mean, I read some of the articles out there. That's my sense, I guess, would be that. I haven't been as focused, just I've been so busy with work and what's going on, kind of other parts of my life right now. That's, I have other things going on. But with Leo, I think I wrote an article when he first came out that I was cautiously optimistic. I think clearly, some of the things that people said that maybe he was kind of the handpick of Francis and things like that doesn't make me feel good on that side. But on the other side, I think Cardinal Burke and others have said some nice things about him, so it makes me hopeful. And like I said before, I grew up with Pope Paul VI, and that was a time you grew up through that very turbulent times in the church, and so I'm kind of used to it. I mean, maybe some of these younger trad Catholics don't remember what it's like from back then, and they're getting their blood pressure up. So I think you just got to be more mellow about the whole thing. So I'm not too worried. I'm hopeful. He had that statement. I think it was the other day. People were looking at it as maybe as a walking back on the Pachamama thing, where he said something about not worshiping the God of nature and not nature itself. Some have I haven't looked closely at what he said, but I think some have viewed that as kind of as a statement to kind of walk back some of that the Pachamama perception of that from whatever happened from that. So
well,
I don't know.
that perception was fueled by Catholic influence, trad Catholic influencers trying to make a scandal out of nothing. I was one that jumped on that bandwagon. That's a discussion for another day. But once I dug in and really researched that, it was totally blown out of proportion, and we won't get into it tonight, Stephen, but I really, really felt like that was a created scandal, not by Pope Francis, but by Catholic influencers to make him look even worse. They took every opportunity to make him look bad, no matter what he said, good or bad. It's interesting. Lifeside News never talked about the good things that Pope Francis said. And he did say many good things. And of course, once I got these influencers out of my head and started reading and doing my own research, I found that a lot of things that they were saying were twisting his words. So Pope Leo didn't directly address the Pachamama issue. He didn't call it that or anything.
No. That's what I'm saying. Some people are looking into that or reading into that as some sort of a kind of because popes will often, if they correct another pope, will kind of do it a roundabout nice way. I'm not saying that's what he did here, but some people have read into that. I find that interesting. I've not really come to a firm opinion on that. I mean, like you said on the Pachamama thing, I think you and I would have to probably agree to disagree. But I still have those images. I mean, some things can be blown out. I think certainly bowing. People were bowing and kind of giving obeisance to these wooden statues. That did not seem proper, and that does seem to give fuel to the claim that there was something more there than just some innocent thing going on. But on the other side, I do think the one thing that never sat right with me is that if they were truly idols, then I would certainly support them being tossed in the river. I mean, we have had many saints have taken axes to idols in the past and all that, so I have no problem with that. But at the same time, it did look bad to see how it was kind of a certain podcaster actually kind of funded it, and then kind of went on his show and kind of acted like he didn't know about it. Then so that didn't help the whole thing. It kind of took some of the shine off of the act that I thought was actually a great thing to do. But that's too bad that happened that way, because I think it made it look bad. It was a publicity stunt, is what it was. So in that extent, I agree with you, but I think I disagree. I think there was cause for concern there, and I think certainly the Vatican's reaction to it at the time, I think, wasn't handled as well as it could have been to put people's mind. If there was a reason, if there was a valid way to put people's mind at ease at the time, it could have and should have been done, and I don't recall it being that way. Then, of course, afterwards you had that coin. Vatican issued that coin with the Mother Earth, with the pregnant woman with the belly being the Earth, which kind of fed into it, kind of reinforced that. So if it was originally innocent, they certainly made missteps that certainly helped the appearance that something untoward had happened there. And but
I believe Leo is not going to make those kind of marketing mistakes.
No, I don't think so. I think he's much more deliberate. I disagree negative portrayals of him. Seems like a nice guy. Like I say, but it's above my pay grade to do anything about it. I mean, if I see things, I'll certainly write articles, good or bad, about what I might see. But I think he's measured. I think he will. I think he is going slow, and I do think some of these things will get addressed in time. So I still remain cautiously optimistic.
I agree with that, Stephen. I do agree with that. Okay, I've got one more question for you. What do you say to Catholic listeners who still feel torn? They want to stay loyal to Benedict, but struggling to accept Francis and now Pope Leo as valid popes. I don't struggle with that at all.
Well, actually, in what way struggle? I mean, just struggle. I mean, there's certainly certain popes people might feel more attached to than others. I like John Paul II growing up. I was a college-aged youngster back in those days, or at least back in the 80s. So I like John Paul II. Francis, as you can tell, I'm not a great fan of his. I do believe he was a true pope, so I have no doubt about that. But if someone is kind of favoring one or the other, I mean, it's kind of like, I forget which verse it is. I think it was a letter from Paul talking about, don't say you're of Apollos or of Paul or of Peter and all that. We're of Christ. Christ is Christ's church. Not Leo's church, not Benedict's church. So you're going to have popes you like. Some popes are better pastorally and doctrinally, and others can step in it. And we just got to be patient. We got to be patient and know our faith. And if there are bad popes, then we have to pray and suffer through that and offer it up, but not give up the ghost and kind of jump overboard. We just got to kind of suck it up, kind of man up and power through it.
Sugar Kitty just jumped up here, and
I saw the tail. Yeah.
Her tail, yeah. So she lays on the desk when I'm working during the day. All right, Stephen, I'm going to let you take a little 45-second break, and everyone will be back, and we'll take your questions and comments for Stephen. So hang on. It's the Eternal Life Plan with Stephen O'Reilly as our guest. All right, everyone, we are back. And Nicole, would you go ahead and put Stephen's ticker up again? And I just want to have everyone go to Stephen O'Reilly's website right here at, I'm not even sure how to say that, Stephen. I'll have to ask you how to say that. And support him by reading his blog, follow him on X, and Stephen will be back in a minute, I think.
I am back. I'm back.
Stephen, how do you say your website name?
Roma Locuta Est.
Okay. All righty. You know how I am about Latin. All right, Nicole, what's our first comment or question? And Nicole, thank you for doing such a wonderful job tonight. I appreciate you. All right, Joseph says, it was the Patrick Coffin video that really conflicted me and caused me to stop following him and leave Coffin Nation financially. I don't know what that's about. Do you, Stephen?
I think what Joseph might be referring to is that Mr. Coffin, at some point in the last couple of years, when Benedict was still alive, had a video where he said, I think he explicitly said Francis is an anti-pope, and then he laid out the seven or so reasons, or the reasons why he felt that. Now, I haven't really seen much on this directly, but I think he's on the pro Leo side. I think he accepts Leo. So I think that's my understanding right now.
Yeah, I was at Church Militant when Patrick Coffin did that video, and Michael Voris refused to allow us to criticize Pope Francis or say he's not the Pope. So he made that very clear to us in a staff meeting about that, and mentioned Patrick's video. So there's that.
He was still I think Benny Papist. I think it was last October, November. LifeSite News had like a series of a debate. People on one side or the other of the Benny Papist. There were like two, like the Benny Papist question, and also whether or not Francis is a true pope or not. I was involved more on the Benny Papist argument, so I had articles. I responded to an article. I think Patrick Coffin had an article that I responded to his, and Dr. Mazza had when I responded to him. So there's some back and forth. Mr. Coffin, I don't think he responded to my article, but I ended up writing about 4 or 5 articles for that, and he did write back then. But I think after the election, I think he's made some.
Yeah, he's back on Pope Leo. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would imagine though he kind of like Chauncey, because he was kind of in the Chauncey circle. So I think he might kind of accept Leo, but probably still consider Benedict the Pope until his death. That's my guess.
Joseph makes a good point. Considering Benedict was a scholar and canon lawyer, I think he would have chosen his words carefully for such an important declaration. I agree with that, Joseph. Yeah. And I think that was the problem with going from Pope Benedict, who was an intellect, to Pope Francis, who was not. Totally different backgrounds. Pope Francis was just more pastoral than an intellect, and having to follow Benedict, I would not envy anybody that would want to follow.
Well, you might say maybe he was more pastoral. I think though he's more loquacious. He was. I'd say that more than anything else, because I don't think he was good pastorally. I mean, he slapped the Chinese lady on New Year's Eve,
right.
Things like that. Take the praying altar boy, ripping his hands apart, things like that. Those are not good pictures for a pope engaged in. But popes historically, I think they realize the authority and the kind of gravitas of their office, so they're always very careful about what they say, even if they're going to start thinking about a doctrinal statement or a dogmatic proclamation, like Pius XI or Pius XII and the Assumption. Right, he's writing to all the world's bishops. He's very careful and methodical about doing something like that, where Francis gets on an airplane and then there's clean up in aisle 16 or something every time he's talking, and that's confusing. And I think what infuriates, what made me mad about the whole thing is that knowing that you're upsetting, there's kind of like some people who kind of grown up like that, who have reached adulthood, they've seen the good and bad of the church, they can kind of deal with that. Others, their faith might be more fragile, and just to kind of say things off the cuff that there might be some explanation for it, but it can rattle people's faith. And I think the damage that's been done by that, I don't think has been told yet. I think, and that's the thing. He just got rattled off a lot of things about hell. There were the interviews with was it Scalfari, the Italian Scalfari.
Yeah.
A lot of things. Maybe. Yeah, they might have now. Some people said, "Oh, well, he never took notes." Yeah, okay, maybe so, but then issue a statement saying, "I didn't say that." And then, but why you keep on going back and interview? If I kept on being interviewed supposedly by Joe Blow for the Atlanta Constitution. Well, Steve says this, Steve says that, and I say nothing about that. If I don't say, I didn't say that, then you start thinking, well, maybe he did say that, and so maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But that's on Francis for not clearing that up.
I agree with that, Stephen. I always said that Francis reminded me of Trump in his first term, because if you remember Trump in his first term, he just said things, and I think people were going, what?
And that goes back to the question, though. Like I said, I don't want to be too hard on the Benny Papist in one respect, is that I think there was some basis to start wondering what's going on, because when you have, it might be easy to forget. There's some good theologians that have questions about Amoris Laetitia. There's the Scalfari interviews and things like that are very unsettling to people, and there's just boom, 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 and you can see why people would be looking and casting about for how do I explain this and kind of keep my Catholic faith. So some people looked at the Benny Papism thing. Now they've clearly went too far. I mean, because the evidence is not there, and that's unfortunate. I think they're so fixed on a solution, they didn't care what evidence they had, as long as they can kind of get rid of Francis in their mind and they can justify it to themselves. So I think there's kind of a lot of false reasoning, a lot of illogical steps they took, and that's unfortunate. And I think that's where I think they've gone wrong, and they need to correct themselves on that.
Okay, Joseph says, even the most solid and orthodox cardinals never questioned his intention to abdicate, and never questioned Francis's election as Pope.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And that's the thing too. That also refers back, or could refer to, the doctrine of universal acceptance. If all the world's bishops accept, and the laity, the moral majority or moral unanimity of the church accepts a man as Pope, he is Pope. That's what the doctors of the church have always taught. So the church accepted Francis as Pope, so he's Pope. And it's illogical to kind of beat your head against that wall and say, no, the church, all the bishops, not a single ordinary came out and said Francis was an anti-pope. No, none of them. And you're just bashing your head against the wall to say, I'm right, they're all wrong. It ultimately comes down to, I think, having this pride, in your own position and the power of your own intellect to kind of say they're all wrong. And that's, I think, one of the other questions, I think, were the ones you sent me, is why did they keep on doing it? I think part of it was, part of it's pride, is that an embarrassment, because a lot of them have really stuck their necks out and their reputations on, and that's unfortunate. Somebody not going to get too far ahead of things, because it's kind of hard to draw back. And they've made a lot of firm statements, attacked a lot of people, and it's kind of hard. The normal, all of us as humans, we all make mistakes, and we don't like to admit it. If we say something bad about a person, we don't want to admit that, or we kind of shut it off, or when we should admit our mistakes, or I was wrong about that, and draw back. But I think they've gone too far out. It's going to be very hard. It's going to take a singular act of grace to get some of these people to, I think, come back off the list they've kind of crawled out of.
Joseph is a longtime viewer. He always brings such logical, good questions. And A Happy Pilgrim is another one that's a longtime viewer that always has some good comments too. In my opinion, we are dealing with a several-pronged attack against the church, the papacy, and Vatican II. This Benny Papism stuff is just one of those prongs, anything to undermine confidence in the hierarchy.
Yeah, definitely. I think Satan has various ways. He's not just going to attack the church only through, say, modernism or liberalism. He's going to take advantage of the weaknesses of conservatives or traditionalists or any of us, to kind of play on what, our pride, or thinking that, the church isn't conservative enough or trad enough for us the way it is. So, how do you explain that? Oh, maybe Benny Papism, maybe sedevacantism. These are all just attacks at the church. And that's why we just kind of have to kind of know our faith, go to mass, participate in the sacraments, and just kind of persevere. Like I said, like the case of Honorius, 40 years for things to kind of correct what happened there.
Yeah, and Stephen, I have said this on my channel many times because I almost fell into the trap of I'm leaving the Catholic Church. Well, if my faith can be shattered by something a pope said, I don't really have faith, do I? My foundation isn't very strong. We can be, Catholics and living our Catholic faith without the Pope doing his thing. We'll still survive.
Well, I think the problem for us, okay, so I guess a problem for us nowadays is like maybe 300 years ago, you're out in the fields or milking the cow. You probably don't hear much. A pope might live for 10 years. You don't even know who the Pope is or something because he's 1,000, 2,000 miles away. There's not much out there in terms of news spreading around and all that, except I guess read his name, the Mass. But you don't hear all those things about the documents that they're coming out with, and there was no airplane news conferences and things like that. So, but now with the instantaneous nature of news and all that we've obviously has come about over the last 100 years, that's more of a problem, and it's a blessing and a problem. Is that sometimes we get ahead of ourselves and kind of interpreting things when we should maybe wait a little bit before we do.
Yeah, sometimes I say, Stephen, ignorance is bliss. Joseph says, I remember Patrick Coffin telling someone to stop following Taylor Marshall because he would lead you to sedevacantism. Funny how that turned out, who led whom to sedevacantism. Well,
I just say, in fairness to Patrick Coffin, I think I've seen after the election of Leo, I think he's accepted Leo. So I don't know, but it is a danger to go into sedevacantism. And in terms of Taylor Marshall, I don't think he has never said Francis is not Pope or Leo is not Pope. So that's not an issue there that I'm aware of.
A happy pilgrim says to Joseph, Patrick's being honest about his position. I'm not a fan of his, but I will give him that. Too many Catholic YouTubers present themselves as faithful Catholics, but are seeds in disguise. I did a video about Taylor Marshall and how every one of his video titles are pretty much formed in a question so that it doesn't appear as if he is saying that Pope Francis is a heretic, although in one video he did. That was the title. He did call him a heretic, but he would always position his questions questioning Pope Leo or Pope Francis.
You put me in a bind because I have to honestly admit that the title of my book is valid with a question mark, but I believe it is a valid resignation. So, but I can't knock him for a question mark title. But I think it's the nature of the beast with marking and all that is do that. I think pretty much everyone or most everyone does things like that. But
Okay, Nicole asked, have you looked into the latest theory that Pope Francis made too many cardinal electors illegally and Pope Leo's election is not valid?
No, I don't think that. I'm aware of that. I mean, I think if what Nicole is referring to in the papal legislation for papal elections for conclaves, is it Dominis Gregis? I forget the name of it, but it calls for 125 electors would be like the 125 electors gathered for the conclave. Over the course of Francis's pontificate, he ended up going over that number, appointing, I think 133. I think Nicole said, or somebody else had said 133 electors. So what do you do? Do you go to the 125? Where do you cut it off?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's unfortunate that he did that, just because it leads to questions like this, and people might say, "Oh, it's not." And I wouldn't be surprised if there are people out there saying, "Oh, the election is invalid because of that." But I would say I'm not a canon lawyer, but obviously the cardinal electors at the conclave addressed that themselves. I think that the press release went out that they all got together and agreed they would conduct the conclave like that. And you have to assume the presumption is there, since Francis appointed that many, that he wanted those many to vote. So I think the presumption, of course, would be that it's a valid conclave and election. So it's not a problem.
Happy Pilgrim says, I'm wondering what Stephen's thoughts are on the papal charism of safety. Will that ever be defined? Would that be an effective tool to
shoot
shut
down?
down? I think to shut down all this nonsense of this Pope teaches heresy.
Well, I mean, that's interesting. In Books' letter to Benedict, he talked about, because he had questions about addressing that people were having questions about, had questions about the validity of the resignation. I don't think I have it handy or readily handy, but he talked about the conditions, how a pope can obviously die, but he could resign, and then about the conditions to kind of for someone to stop being a pope. They can obviously die, they could resign, and then he mentioned, or in cases of heresy or schism. Now that wasn't so he threw that out. So certainly in Books' mind, it's possible for a pope to fall into heresy. That wasn't a question that Benedict took up in the letter, and because that really wasn't the issue in the letter. So that I wouldn't read anything to Benedict not addressing that. And the fact that Books asked the question doesn't mean that it's true because he posed the question either. It's never been that's been a question posed by theologians, whether or not a pope could fall into heresy or not. We've had popes who have had erroneous opinions that would later become heresies after they were defined. So that'd be the case of like John the 22nd. In some homilies, he voiced his erroneous opinions about the beatific vision, and then there was some confusion about that. I think he even disciplined a cardinal or two. He had him in prison, but in the end, he repented on his deathbed and said he only meant that as his personal opinions. And he never put it into any kind of official teaching document. And then the Pope immediately after him proclaimed the Church's doctrine infallibly on the beatific vision. So I guess you can have popes who can obviously teach error. Vatican I teaches what the conditions are for a infallible statement, ex cathedra statement. So theoretically, anything short of an ex cathedra statement, I guess there could be room for error. How extreme an error? I guess that's what Paul's getting to in terms of safety, the charism of safety. How big of an error could it be before you really infringe upon the protections for infallibility? Yeah, I guess there should probably some. I do think something like that might come out, Paul, following, because there is a lot of confusion that came out of Francis, and it will eventually have to be dealt with in one way or another. And I think, if only just to answer that question.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Paul. Paul's another long-time watcher. Once there is universal and peaceful acceptance of a pope, then the irregularities of the conclave don't matter. That's
correct. And one thing I want to point out on that too is that in the course of these debates on LifeSite News, Dr. Mazza on some of his articles there, and also on podcasts, that he's repeated this error several times, and no one's ever corrected him on it. I did in my article, but no one on a podcast has corrected him. He always brings up the case of Urban VI, who was a pope elected, I forget what year, 13 or 12, something or other. Urban VI was elected by the College of Cardinals. And then the College of Cardinals, like the next day, were like, saying, "Oh, we made a mistake." They thought this guy was a jerk, or they alleged they were pressured. And then months later, they elected Clement VII. Clement VII we now consider him to be an anti-pope. So Urban VI, the first pope all the cardinals voted for, was the pope. They kind of said they were pressured, so they went off months later. I think 4 or 5 months later, they elected Clement VII. And so they ended up having part of Europe following Urban VI, another part of Europe following Clement VII, and Dr. Mazza was saying, well, gee, he's trying to use this as a case to say Francis is not Pope, because here you had 100% of the cardinals voted for an anti-Pope. So that's what 100% of the cardinals voted for Francis. He said, that shows that universal acceptance doesn't work, but that's not what the doctrine of universal acceptance is. Universal acceptance is that the church, which is kind of the totality, the cardinals and all the bishops and the laity. It doesn't mean 100% recognize this man as a pope. It means a moral unanimity of them recognize. So it's like the great majority recognizes one man as pope. But Dr. Mazza says, well, the cardinals, that's not, he always says, well, the cardinals recognize Clement VII, so therefore that's like unanimous consent. Well, that's not what unanimous consent is, or universal acceptance is by the doctors in the church. It's when the whole church looks at it. He always kind of blows it up, and it's an error on his part, and as the church historian, he should know a lot better than he's saying, and I don't know why he keeps on saying it.
Okay. Nicole, any more comments or questions for Stephen? I guess not. Stephen, before we end, will you lead us in prayer and say a Hail Mary?
Yeah, sure. Just don't ask me to say it in Latin.
And could we pray for the intention of Pope Leo?
Sure.
Okay.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Thank you, Stephen.
Sure.
Okay, everyone, if there's no more questions and comments, you know how we end. And Stephen, I want to thank you for spending so much time with us tonight and helping
Sure, thank you for having me on. Oh, yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
and I want everyone to go to Stephen's website. It's scrolling down at the bottom and read his articles. They're very good. They're very, very good. And buy his books and support Stephen on X. And he's very active on X. You put out some good posts, Stephen.
Well, thank you.
He's much more diplomatic than I am on my post.
Not always.
Yeah, you're much better than I am. And just remember, eternal life is forever. Got a plan, and we all know our plan is Jesus. I will see you on Monday evening at 8 p.m. And I have got a wild show on Monday night, Stephen. Oh my gosh, you guys, let me tell you about this before we end. I came across all of these fake Catholic media companies, all AI driven, every video, AI voice. Oh my gosh. Have I got a show for you Monday night to avoid these and the comments, Stephen? These people think this stuff is real. There was this one video talking about the Pope's homily, how he was warning the cardinals, and I copied the transcript and I looked for that homily. That homily doesn't exist anywhere. So I've got a show for you Monday night on this fake AI stuff that I want to show you these YouTube and Instagram accounts that you've got to avoid, everyone. So that's Monday night. And again, eternal life is forever. Thank you, Stephen. Got a plan? Our plan is Jesus. God bless you all.